Hello there, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the daily discussion for the 30th of October 2014. My name is Tuskeh, and today we are going to be discussing a message I received on Facebook. You can contact me via Facebook. It will probably take me a while to reply because I've never used Facebook before. But this message is from Cody Venn, and he says, "Greetings, friend. After watching your Alliance or Horde daily discussion, I was wondering, what is your top 10 favorite raids and why? I feel like this could be an awesome topic to talk about since so many people come to you for advice when getting into raiding." Alright. So let's discuss this. So at first I was thinking about my top 10 raids and trying to note down what they were, but then I thought, I'm going to go down to 5, because that way I can just talk about 5 in detail and just go from there. Because there are a lot of good raids in World of Warcraft. There are some bad ones, of course. You can't hit the nail on the head every single time, especially with something as complex as raiding, because making a good raid is not just about mechanics, it's not just about the art style, it's not just about the story behind it, it's about all those different things. There's so many different things about what makes a raid instance good, and of course this is going to be entirely subjective. You'll probably disagree with me, although actually, hopefully you won't, because it probably won't surprise too many people what my favorite raids are, but let's just go through them anyway. So, let's dive straight into it, I say, with number 5. Karazhan. Yeah, Karazhan. One of the most incredible raids ever created by Blizzard, I would say, and a real crown on the gem of the Burning Crusade, definitely. Karazhan was a really great raid. It was very big. The different bosses were all very different in terms of mechanics and in terms of theme, because you had all these different kind of ancient bosses from Medivh's old tower, his guards, the people that lived in his tower, and then you've got the chess event, which is entirely unique. Even today, the chess event is completely unique. And it may be very difficult to solo, but can you imagine doing that with 10 people? Because that's what you had to do. You had 10 people playing chess against the AI. It was very fun. It wasn't particularly hard, but it was very fun. And of course, you've got the influence of the Burning Legion there in terms of the final boss. And you've got Nightbane, a very memorable dragon. And it's all just very interesting. And there's a lot of impact to the place because this is where Medivh lived. This was his place, and he was a very important character in the history of World of Warcraft. And actually going to his place and seeing his spirit and seeing just how fucked up everything is was really cool. And it was my first ever raid as well, which puts a little bit of personal bias on the whole thing. But hey, this whole thing is biased. And of course, you've got the Opera event, which is completely unique, again, and very interesting. It had a lot of RNG as to which boss you'd fight, and it would be very annoying if you just fight the same boss over and over again, or you happen to fight one of the more difficult bosses. I know I didn't like Romulo and Juliane, and I did not like the Wizard of Oz either, but I barely got the Wizard of Oz, and I got Romulo and Juliane a lot. So, isn't that very strange? So you were kind of left to the whims of the RNG. That didn't really stop Karazhan from being an incredible raid. So, that's number 5. Number 4 is the Firelands, jumping forwards into Cataclysm now. The Firelands is a really great raid for a lot of reasons. The mechanics were very good. I did all of the Firelands while it was unnerfed. I did it on normal mode. Never got around to doing heroic, but I healed it and I did the entire instance. I did end up defeating Ragnaros, and it was all very, very good. I liked the mechanics of it. They were very good, very interesting. They did a lot with fire. I'm surprised they got away with doing so much with fire. It was very orange, but I loved the aesthetic. I really did. I loved the whole elemental plane of fire. It felt like you're stepping out into a place that you do not belong. You're not on Azeroth anymore. You're standing in the elemental plane of fire, just surrounded by all of the denizens of flame, and you just feel like you don't belong there. And I just think that's a really great aesthetic and artistic design, and they pulled off so many great different variations of enemies, with the fire spiders, the massive giants, the largest, most ancient elemental in the form of the giant, great big elemental boss. I forget what his name is. He's the guy with the 2 legs that you have to knock around. I'm trying to remember his name. Lord Rhyoleth, that's it, Lord Rhyoleth. He was a very interesting boss. I thoroughly enjoyed fighting him. He was very interesting and unique. And flying in the air with Elisrazor was great. The fight with Shanox was pretty generic, but that's just that. As was the fight with the Gate Guardian. What's his name? I forget all their names. Balrog, that's it. Balrog the Gatekeeper. But I liked Major Domo, and the Ragnaros fight was really good. I love how the fight ends both ways in normal and heroic, where on normal he's just like, nope, I can't handle this, and he just runs away. On heroic, he tries to do the same thing, but then Cenarius, Malfurion, and Hamel show up, and they're like, no, you fight now, and they pull him out of the lava, and that's when he gets his legs, which was a bit controversial when that came out, but there you go. So, that was the Firelands. Absolutely loved that raid instance. Absolutely loved it. So that was number 4. Number 3 is the Throne of Thunder. Oh boy, the Throne of Thunder. What an instance. It's kind of let down by the fact that I've done it so much over the course of Mists of Pandaria, and it's very difficult to see great raids when you're doing them constantly. I mean, the Siege of Orgrimmar is a great raid as well, and the Throne of Thunder is a fantastic raid. I would say it's better than the Siege of Orgrimmar because it introduces us to an entirely new zone, and I love the whole exploration element of going into a raid for the first time and seeing all the new stuff. which didn't really happen in the Siege of Orgrimmar. It kind of happened in the second half when you were going down into Garrosh's secret base. And of course you had it the same with the Veil of Eternal Sorrows, but it still felt a little bit old, even when you first stepped into it. Unlike the Throne of Thunder, which was entirely new. And the Throne of Thunder is a great raid instance for several reasons. First of all, a good portion of it is dedicated to trolls, which is just brilliant. You see the whole last stand of the Zandalari Empire and their different troll tribes coming together to fight you. And it's really interesting because you think that if they'd have all banded together while all of their tribes were at the height of their power, they would have been unstoppable. But as it stands, they couldn't withstand the might of Azeroth now, even when they banded together, which is a terrible shame for the trolls. But, you know, that wasn't their last stand. I'm sure the Zandalari are still out there on their island, and it's going to be interesting to see how it goes. So there's that. Obviously, the trolls did a lot to help for it, but I love the whole art style of it. I love the whole dreary, but also really kind of ancient-looking zone with the rain, constant rain, and the thunder and the lightning, and just the whole theme of the whole place was great. I really loved it. It felt like a really old and ancient place that has recently come back to life with the resurrection of Lei Shen, the Thunder King, and it has loads of hidden secrets. Like, I love the fact that, you don't see this on LFR, but on normal mode, now called Heroic, if you go in there and Lei Shen is all like, you will not get to me, because there's a bridge that leads straight from the Council of Elders right up to Lei Shen's room. But as you go across it, Lei Shen destroys it, and you go into the Forgotten Depths, and you land in front of Tortos. And you have to fight your way out, and I think that's really cool. I really, really like that whole idea. And you kind of go through the sewer systems to fight your way back up to the main level. And it makes the place feel very big, which is really great. I love big instances, but at the same time, it didn't feel too big, you know? The only downside to the Throne of Thunder, I think, is it's too linear. I would have loved more kind of decisions in terms of what bosses you could fight, maybe in the sewers, like going in different directions to fight maybe Darumu or Ji-Kun first. As it stands, I'm not a big fan of linear instances, which is, maybe that's a bit of a spoiler for what number 2 and number 1 are going to be, but I love raids that kind of open and you can kind of go in any direction you want to fight different bosses, and I hear that's more what they're going to do in Warlords of Draenor, so 2 thumbs up to that. But in terms of the Throne of Thunder, I really think that they did a great job with the different boss fights. They all felt very unique. There were some really interesting ones in there. I like the Darumu fight. I love the Lei Shen fight. It's so intense. I love how they just made that fight just basically like, okay, at the end of it, in like the last phase, it's just ability, 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 over and over and over again. He really just tries to kill you. I love that whole feel. And of course, I've never actually seen a Raden. I really want to. I think maybe sometime I should see about doing that. But damn, I've looked at it and that whole fight seems really kind of interesting. Not amazing in terms of mechanics, just in terms of lore. Seeing a Titan Protector, just like in Ulduar, and so very good. And I love the different music. I love the Zandalari music. I love the kind of different Titan kind of tones you can hear in the music of the Throne of Thunder, and damn, just the whole place. Just so interesting and so mysterious, and it really felt like an old, forgotten bastion of antiquity that we're invading and stopping from becoming a world powerhouse. And that is why I love the Throne of Thunder. So many different reasons, but really, really a great raid. So that leads me to number 2. And I just talked about it. It's Ulduar. Oh, Ulduar, a favourite raid instance for so many different people, and Wrath of the Lich King brought so many great raids. Not so much in its first tier. Naxxramas and the Obsidian Sanctum were kind of crap, but the second tier and the last tier of the Wrath of the Lich King were just so good. So very good. So, Ulduar, an ancient titan complex underneath sleeps an old god that's broken free of his imprisonment. Wow, where to even start? Well, we'll go linearly. You start by helping Bran and his expedition, which is cool. Not a massive, great big thing, especially for the Horde. A little bit more for the Alliance, I would imagine, but Bran Bronzebeard, very cool dwarf, probably my favourite dwarf. And you go and you do the very, very unique first fight against the Flame Leviathan in the vehicles. That was the first real kind of implementation of vehicles into a full fight. Malagos was a little bit less so, and of course he was part of the first tier. I even forgot to mention him, but one boss, not that great. But yeah, vehicles were involved in Malagos, but not to the extent of Flame Leviathan, and not to the customization where you had to have so many different things. And it's a bit of a shame because the Flame Leviathan relied on teamwork. And now you can just kind of nuke him down with Demolishers, but you needed every single vehicle there. And I'll let you know why. The Demolishers were your DPSs, but they needed people on the extra guns to shoot down Pyrite from the sky, and then hook it in so that you could keep using Pyrite. And the actual turret guys had an ability that sped up the Demolisher. You had to actually run away from the Flame Leviathan if he chased you. Like, he would two-shot your vehicle. And the raid damage that he just passively did that kind of put a soft enrage on the fight would pretty much instantly kill anyone without a vehicle. But it was more than that as well. In the Demolishers, sometimes the turret guy would have to jump into the actual Demolisher cannon and then get thrown onto the Flame Leviathan to help deal with turrets. so that you'd kill the turrets, Flame Leviathan would take extra damage. And then, when you killed the turrets, Flame Leviathan would throw you off and start doing raid damage again. So you needed some people on the bikes to go and pick up these people. They had an extra seat, so they go up and pick up these people and bring them back to their demolishers. And then the bikers could also drop tar to slow the Flame Leviathan down. All the meanwhile, the tanks would be in the big siege engines, and they would just be doing damage from behind and kiting if the Flame Leviathan ever targeted them. But Flame Leviathan would also use flame vents, and he often tells you in raid warning, and there's a reason, because it's interruptible. And it was up to the tanks in their siege engines to interrupt the flame vents to stop the raid damage from spiking too high. So you can see it was a massive, very complicated fight, and that was without the 4 towers putting it onto hard mode. And damn, Ulduar was also where they introduced heroic modes, essentially, and that was really interesting. They didn't do it perfectly. There were some examples where they kind of buggered it up, but you know, that's where they first really introduced hard modes to a full raid. But yeah, just damn, that first fight was interesting. Then you go on to fight Ignis the Furnace Master. He was pretty good, not amazing. He was just kind of generic, but he wasn't a bad fight. Then you had Razor Scale kind of flying in the sky and you had to drag her down. Kind of an interesting gimmick, but not the best fight. It was just kind of ads for a whole bunch of time, and then you fight Razor Scale, but not that bad. And then after her, you had XT002, who built himself a strong legacy with his bloody loud and annoying voice. A hard fight. Very difficult, especially on hard mode, but damn. He was very memorable, and he was very cool. And then after that, you headed into the actual halls of Ulduar, and you had that little flourish. I'm just going to play it now. You had that flourish where you first step into Ulduar, and you just hear that music. So good. So very good. And then you move on to fight the Assembly of Iron, which you could fight in so many different ways. And that was a really good council fight. You'd have to decide which one dies first, and that would decide how hard the fight was. And oh, it was just so very good. I really, really liked it. I loved that little fight. And then if you did them on their hardest mode, you had that whole lore event with the Tribunal, where you'd learn about Algalon the Observer and the potential destruction of all of Azeroth. And then after that, you went and you fought Kolaghan, who was really cool. His aesthetic was so cool. He's just the giant with the 2 arms, and you have to destroy his arms, and just, oh, it was so very cool. And then after he dies, he becomes a bridge leading into the main chamber, where just things open up so much. You can go and fight any of the 4 Watchers, Freya, Thorim, Hodir, and Mimiron, and they were all completely unique. They all felt like little end bosses, and they were just so cool. So very cool. And Freya and Thorim had a lot of lore behind them, as did Hodir. Mimiron to a lesser extent, but they all had lore behind them, and you could see it all happen and out in the world. Oh, it was so very good. Very interesting fights. Hodir was a bit of a DPS race. He was very unique in terms of jumping on top of ice. Freya was all about healing and killing her ads. Thorim was about splitting the group into 2 and then fighting him. And Mimiron was so unique. The whole coming together of the 3 bosses into one great big super boss. Oh, so very cool. So very, very, very cool. And then after you defeated those, you would go down into the destroyed halls of madness, essentially, where you'd fight General Vezax, and that whole place was very eerie. And General Vezax was a really unique fight in terms of, oh, you don't have mana regen. Good luck. That was so scary to do as a mana user, and oh, so good. And the whole aesthetic of the place with the Saronite crystals growing out of the ground and the floating kind of almost church stained glass vibe. And on some of them you can see old gods, and one of them looks like the Shah. Whoa, mind blown. So very cool, so very cool. And then you had Yogg-Saron, just an amazing fight. It had lore in it with the 3 different kind of phases you could see in terms of his visions. It had just like tentacles everywhere, and then fighting him and his ads, and the whole first phase with the avatar of him, and oh, it was a great fight. Yogg-Saron was an amazing fight. And I'll have you know, I wiped our raid the first time I did it because I went into his mind room and I was just like, whoa. And I just watched the lore, and then I died and we didn't have enough DPS to kill the brain, and then we wiped. But you know, it was so interesting. I'm such a roleplay nerd, but oh, it was such a great fight. And then you had Algalon the Observer, one of the hardest fights in all of Wrath of the Lich King, really. I mean, even when the Lich King was killed, Algalon was still a nasty bastard. And you only had an hour to try and attempt him every week. I don't know why they decided to do that. They wanted him to be a guild breaker, and he did break some guilds. His mechanics weren't amazing, but they were difficult. He hit so hard, so very hard. But I mean, the whole fight was very challenging, and the theme of it was really cool. I love the whole idea of, yeah, you have to beat him or Azeroth is fucked, which doesn't entirely explain what happens if you wipe, but you know, I just find it really, really interesting. So that was Ulduar, a great instance, absolutely magnificent. And so that leads me on to my favorite raid in all of World of Warcraft. Now, I love raids, I really do. And I love the whole theme behind them and fighting these really important characters. And there are some really great raids out there, but there is one raid that has done it better than any other, in my opinion. A raid full of bosses, that's open, that involves major lore characters that you spent the entire expansion fighting against. And one of the largest and most respected villains in all of World of Warcraft was the end boss, and you fought your way up to fighting him, and you probably know what it is already, but my favourite raid is Icecrown Citadel. Oh my god. Icecrown Citadel is an incredible raid. The best raid, in my opinion, that Blizzard has ever released. Why? Because there's so much weight to it. The Lich King is one of the best villains that Blizzard has ever created, and they did so much with his raid. They took their time with it. They made it really great. And let's just go through it. Not only has the whole expansion led to the invasion of Icecrown Citadel, but the whole instance leads up to Arthas. So you've got Lord Marigar, a great big unique undead bone elemental who is just put together from bones of dead adventurers who've tried to infiltrate Icecrown before. And then you've got Lady Death Whisper, who is just a bitch. She's just the leader of the Cult of the Damned above even Kel'Thuzad, and she is just such a preacher, and she's just really fanatical, and her fight was pretty cool. All about ads, not amazing, but, you know, not bad. And then you go up onto your airship and you fight the enemy, in my case, the Alliance. That fight was just so interesting. I mean, it was really easy, but I love the whole theme of 2 gunships fighting it out, and that was so cool when you first saw it. And then you see Sarfang and Muradin having a big argument about, you know, get out of my way! No, you get out of my way! Okay, we'll fight each other. That was really cool. And then Deathbringer Sarfang, which had loads and loads of lore behind it if you were Horde. That was really good. The only downside of that is, of course, you had to wait about 2.5 minutes to every single pull. That was a nightmare, but the fight was very difficult, and it was a very big DPS race, and you had to do it pretty perfectly. But yeah, it was really good. I liked that fight, and that felt like a really big end to the Sarfang kind of storyline, which was very good. And then after that, things, again, they open up. And on the Plague Wing, you fight Professor Putricide, who's just one great big reference. And then you have his 2 Abomination kind of children. They were both very unique, and they both had themes that made it into the Putricide fight. And then the fight with him was very long and interesting, multi-phase, lots of things to do with ads and avoiding abilities to make sure you can out-DPS him. And if the tanks died in the last phase, he'd heal for like half his health, and you would just wipe. So it was very intense. That was really great. And on Heroic, it was even harder. That you had to debuff that you had to pass around in addition to everything else. You had 2 ads instead of 1. They'd both do... Oh, it was very difficult. But yeah, Putricide, a very good and difficult fight. And then on the Bloodwing, you had the Council of the 3 Blood Princes, which is really cool. And I love that they're from the different zones that you've gone and you've killed them. And then they've been reanimated here. And you can see portals behind them from where they came from. And then the actual fight itself had a lot of different mechanics. On Heroic, it was even more interesting because if you moved, you'd take damage. You'd put a stacking dot on yourself. So you had to do the fight while moving as little as possible. That was really interesting. And then you had Blood Queen Lanethel, who was just a massive DPS race, turning people into vampires who had to bite other vampires. And the healing on that fight was insane. I remember when I was on my Holy Priest, that's when I first kind of did Icecrown Citadel. I had to kill myself to get my Spirit of Redemption form just so I'd have mana to finish the last bit of the fight. I was just like, okay, don't heal me, I'm jumping in the fire. Okay, Spirit of Redemption, spam heal everything. And that's why we finished the fight. But yeah, that was really interesting and I loved that fight. And then you had Valithria Dreamwalker in the Frostworm lair. A really unique fight. The first fight where the boss was about healing, not about damage, which was so unique when it first came out. So interesting. And it really opened the way for a lot of really interesting mechanics after Icecrown Citadel. The fight itself wasn't amazing. You just had ads to deal with, and you had to heal her, and you had a little extra phase where you'd go and pick up orbs in the air by jumping into the Emerald Dream. I think that was really interesting, and it kind of gave you an insight into how dragons were turned into frostworms. I found that very interesting. But in terms of mechanics, it wasn't amazing. And then on to Sindragosa, who was, an incredibly big character. She was on the login screen every single time you logged on. And if you ever got DC'd, damn, she would taunt you. She really would. And then she was in, the main cinematic trailer. And you see her in Northrend. You see her in the Pit of Sauron. She wipes out most of your friends. And you really want revenge on her. And the fight against her is very good. She yells a lot. She's got a very, very difficult voice to listen to. But yeah, she felt completely insane in terms of her voice. And she was just completely insane in terms of the fight. She was a difficult fight. She had the whole mechanic where you'd get members of your raid frozen, then you had to dodge around them. It felt a lot like Sapphiron in that kind of way, and it was very interesting to do. And then you had the Lich King, one of the most impressive fights in all of World of Warcraft. Multi-phased, loads of mechanics, and just so many different things to do. Where he would make the platform, he'd destroy the platform, he'd summon your souls, he would summon loads of ads, he would suck people into Frostmourns where they'd have to survive, which is kind of like the Noroshen mechanic. You'd have to go into Frostmourn, you'd get sucked into Frostmourn, you'd have to do something. He'd summon spirits from his sword, he would do a massive great big swing on the tank, he'd summon Defile. Now let me talk about Defile. Defile is one of the most dangerous mechanics in all of WoW. Right? This is how it works. He targets a random player and puts a little pool under their feet, right? After a couple seconds. Doesn't sound that bad. But if it deals damage to anyone, it grows in size. If it deals damage to one person, it just grows a little bit. If it deals damage to 2, it grows a little bit more. So if someone was in the raid group and dropped the Defiler on the whole raid, they'd all take damage and the pool would expand to the size of the whole raid. And bang, you all die just instantly. And that mechanic was so scary and really interesting to look at. So yeah, really, really good. And then on Heroic, the Lich King was insane. I did it when it was content, when I did it was actual progress. I never won. He put these little shadow traps down on the floor. It's just this little circle. It doesn't seem that bad. If you stand in it, bang, you get launched off the platform. Just whee, and off you go. That was the whole thing. It was so interesting. And of course, you had the Valkyr that swooped down and picked people up. You had to stop them from dropping people off the side of the ledge. Just so many interesting things. So many interesting things you could do. It was really great. And just so amazing. It really was. Just absolutely great. And then, of course, when he won, he would kill everyone. And you think, oh, we wiped. But no, he's just sitting there and saying, yeah, you've lost. You're not supposed to win this fight. And then Tyrion breaks free from the ice and breaks Frostmourne with the power of the light. And then it was so great. Such a great conclusion to such a great character. And a lot of people said that when Arthas died, World of Warcraft died with him. I don't agree with that, but damn, he was such an incredible fight. He really was. So yeah, that's it. Those are my top 5. There are some great raids out there. I'd like to hear what you think. I'd like to hear what your favorite raids are, whether you agree, disagree with my points, and just, tell me what you think. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. That's it for today's daily discussion. I hope you enjoyed it and found it helpful. If you have suggestions for topics or you wish to send me your questions to answer on the daily discussion, you can contact me using the links in the description, or you can just leave a comment. Our piece of music for today will be music within the zone that Icecrown Citadel is placed. So, Icecrown itself. This place is really dark, gloomy, and when you go there, you feel like, holy shit, this place is just dead. It is just undead. This whole place is just completely overrun. This is what the world will look like if we lose. So imagine that while you listen to this music, because damn, it is good. So thank you very much for watching, and I wish you the best of luck with your gaming endeavors. What are you doing up here? You're a quest giver. Get back in there, you'll fall off. Think of all you have to live for. Oh, well, I suppose you don't actually have that much to live for. Yeah, go ahead.